Hi there, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Joining me tonight is Ben Kinsley, our co-host and co-producer.
Thank you, Pat.
And a special guest tonight, a candidate. We're doing our special candidate series, is Theo Kennedy, who I know rather well. Theo,
Good
welcome.
to see you, Pat. Thanks for having me.
So could
Thank you
you
so much for being
tell
here.
our
Thank you
audience
for-
all about you? I have a sheet here and it goes on forever, so good luck
really?
with that history thing.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to come on.
My pleasure.
You're such a. I only ever mean what I say. You're such a respected
You're
voice,
so sweet, thank
and
you.
you're very respectful. And I think that's something that we really need to keep in politics.
Yes, we do.
And so that we listen to each other on the merits of things, and we learn to trust each other through actually doing things together.
You're speaking my language, Theo.
I know. Well, I remember. I'll get on point with what you want me to answer, but I
okay.
remember having the pleasure and opportunity to work with you. I think you were Commissioner of maybe Human Resources at the time.
I was, yep.
And I was at Banking and Insurance, Securities and Healthcare, and we were. You were overseeing the development of the state employee health plan, and I remember working carefully with your department on that, and we were able to ensure that folks on the state employee health plan were afforded all the same mandates and coverage that are in the private sector book of business. And so through that process, and then having the benefit of staying on in roles in the Douglas administration, I was able to have an ongoing relationship with you. So I was like, okay, if there's a chance to come in here and get on Pat's show, because I sit there and watch it on rerun, But,
thank you for that.
No, because it matters, to get to the content of things. So I was born in Brunswick, Maine, and I grew up in a lot of different places. Really, my dad was a professor and moved us around, but mostly in New York. I also was in a Quaker school in Philadelphia. I went to first grade in Puerto Rico, and I speak a few languages. But I went to Middlebury College, and I fell in love, like so many of us do. I mean, this is my home. I've been a serial renter, as it were, until I bought my first home with my wife here in about 20 years ago. We came back to Vermont, and so I was in Middlebury College. I was 10 years after Jim Douglas's class, actually, because we both were disc jockeys at the college.
Oh, gosh, I remember that.
Yeah, and I had an Italian show, a French show, and then an eclectic music show, but at one point, the signal for the college broadened, and we had a gathering, and I think His Honor, Jim, was I think just beginning his treasurer stint at that time, and but of course he went to Middlebury and was a representative
and teaching there now.
Yes, and it's a great institution among many others that we have in our state. So so a little bit back on track about myself. I came to live intentionally in Vermont with my second wife. I have 4 children, and I had a divorce, and I love Vermont, and always kind of eyed coming back here, and I had completed some, after Middlebury, I worked for Brookline Public Schools for a while, and I was an administrator there and a teacher, and then I went and got a law degree at Boston University, and I also got a master's in public health with a concentration in environmental health. And I was kind of searching around, and I saw this job in the Consumer Affairs and Public Information Division at our Department for Public Service, which oversees the utilities. And I just grabbed at it. They promised me I could do my clerkship, which I did under Jim Volz, which is a requirement. And loved that area, and became fairly conversant in that part of state work. And then when I got my law license and met my commitment to the department, I started foraging around, and the healthcare administration director of rates and forms came open. And that kind of is at the pulse of the private health insurance market. And so for me, it's not dry. As an attorney, I love the details, but there was a lot to learn in that area, and it's another big sector of kind of states' involvement in the private health insurance market. And then I got drawn over to Agency of Human Services to become Director of Policy at the Department for Children and Families.
Oh, wow.
I was in that role for about 7.5 years, and I think you knew me through some of those things.
I'm trying to remember, because some of this is ringing a bell.
Well, the thing is it's time to sell myself a little bit, 'cause I'm running for office. I really like the work, but so the Director of Policy at then PATH had oversight initially for all of covered services and eligibility in Medicaid, but also all the other public benefit programs. And as you know, under the Douglas administration, we did a pretty substantial and I think thoughtful reorganization, and it became the Department for Children and Families.
Right.
The covered services piece went over to DEVA. And, but it also has the Child Development Division and Disability Determination Services. And I won't go into the whole agency, but the Agency of Human Services is obviously a huge part of our budget.
Yeah, it's huge.
And I really did a lot of projects in that role with the agency as well, whether it's on the Institutional Review Board or helping bring in the homelessness monies that came in after we had a recession. And then I became interested in doing some really more private law work, and I got involved in a toxic tort matter and decided I would just stick with private practice for a while. And I was very blessed to go to a Washington County Bar Association meeting and met Anthony Otis, who I knew from the years of his working in state government. And I said, I'm thinking about leaving. He goes, you want to come over to me? So I was like, okay, well, that's a little more, a little faster than I had anticipated, but yeah, let's talk about it a little bit more. And he had a distinguished career.
Yeah. Well, you worked very well with him, from what I saw when I was over at the offices. You had a good relationship with him working.
I really love people, and we all have our idiosyncrasies, and I think that, how we listen to each other and how we have each other's back, even if it's a stranger, it really matters. But he wasn't a stranger, and he had been a clerk at the Supreme Court. Long story short is he had an active government relations practice, and my only request is that I would be also able to continue to grow my private practice, which I've been doing. And,
wonderful.
And it's actually growing in a lot of different areas, mostly a civil practice. Occasionally things cross into criminal, but you got to know what you know and know who to refer things to. But I spent a lot of time getting people from the Bar Association, Loyal Referral Service, just who need, similar to some of the consumer assistance roles that one has to play in government, whether it's the governor's hotline or the CAPI hotline or backing up consumer and insurance. When you're out here in private practice, legal aid is they have their hands full.
Yeah, they do. It's just too much
and there
going
are
on.
many, many people. So, I, again, trying to get to the content of things, it's a little bit my background, but I have solutions in mind. I mean, generally, I think what I've tried to do in my life is learn as much as I can and then try to figure out how to solve problems, really. So I guess I'm here to help. I understand complexity, and I have solutions, and I follow through, and so I think it's a good fit for public office.
That's great.
Yeah.
Could you explain to folks what you are running for?
Hey, 5 minutes in, we don't know that yet, right? But that's because I'm so comfortable with you. Yeah, I'm running as a Democrat for Washington County Senate.
Right.
There's a primary on August 14th.
Right.
There's people can take an early absentee ballot before
I
then.
voted yesterday.
Oh, good for you. That's excellent.
It's already in.
It is. It's done.
It's done. And a lot
Have
of
you
people
been out much to the outlying areas, because they're beautiful? Calais, I mean, there's so many great places out there.
Yeah, well, I live here and I'm an active person, and but specifically canvassing, I've been to almost all the towns at this point. It's hard to get everywhere, so I use there was a software tool that helps me kind of know where the voters are.
Nice.
So I've been using that, but no, I was. I tried to start in the distant areas, not just the more populated areas. So I spent some time in Woodbury recently, and in the edge of Marshfield, over in Cabot. I went over to Roxbury, in Northfield, and well, most all of them. I don't need to list all of them, but and the time's running out. I'm going to get back out. But
You're doing well with your signs. I saw a lot of signs in this area anyway. I was riding around there and I said, damn, man's everywhere. That's a good thing, Theo.
Well, you know what? I feel blessed. It means that people who, know me enough that they're going to put a sign out for me.
And they were on people's lawns, not on the
not necessarily in the public way. But I got to go do that. We're all going to do that in the last week.
Yeah, last week it's okay, but because I was in transportation, and it takes me so hard to pass by those illegal signs. You want to go out and get them off.
Well, I know what you mean, and I'll just say quickly, being a rules guy, I did actually get all the rules, and some of the clerks are saying, we haven't been asked that specific question, but I kind of know. But it's all part of the bundle of things you want to do to help people get to know you.
Great. Great.
So
Good.
what
So-
topics we want to cover? Is that an
Yeah,
okay intro?
that's quite okay.
Well, I mean,
Jump-
the first one obviously is, what are you hoping to achieve if you win? Not just the primary, which is less than 2 weeks away, but the general election in November. What are you and you are elected to the state senate? What things are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, well, it's very important. One of the things is, and I have some specifics, and I'm going to mention a few. But one of the things that I think about an office like that is those of us who've either been around it a lot or kind of have a sense of it. There's all things are happening all the time in government, right? And it's always about the details. So one part of the job is constituent service. That I just love and thrive at.
I agree with you.
And and it's not like you can help everybody all the time, but just to be able to give information or help people find out where they can get the information they need to help themselves. That's what government should be doing, and we should be doing that all the time in a bunch of areas. So part of what I look forward to, if I'm honored to serve, will be to be a public servant and try to provide constituent service. And when we were at the agency, we helped develop 211. That's an example of a wonderful tool
Right.
of that sort. So that's one thing I just want to say generally, and of course bills of any sort need to be attended to carefully and read carefully. But then in content areas, I have specific solutions in mind that I'd like to engage others. I'm not someone who's going to come in like a bull in a china shop.
Right.
We have a lot of distinguished people that serve. A lot of them I feel are my friends. And we need, I think, in Vermont really to lead, continue to lead, I should say more aptly, by demonstrating a collaborative approach, by demonstrating an ability to listen carefully to people across parties and try to understand the kind of the merits of their arguments. In healthcare, I think, I'm not a Democrat or a person that has a dream out there that's what I'm going to try to do today, right? You can have ideals, but then you got to figure out how are you going to achieve them, and is it realistic, and do we have the money, and how will it work? And so I was implemented, not alone, with a team, our outpatient prescription drug benefit, Medicare Part D.
Oh,
If you
really?
remember that, I was lead counsel on that,
Yep.
and
Oh.
so things like that. Those are real projects. Everything from IT to finance to legal to personnel to staffing to consumer support. So anything that you do, in my mind, has to be done with an eye towards actually being able to be accomplished. So there's a pragmatism that kind of, if people get to know me, they're going to find out about me. Doesn't mean I'm not a dreamer. I've got some ideas I'd like to do. So in healthcare, for example, I think the idea that Vermont can go its own as a single payer, I think that's imprudent. I like the idea that everyone should have affordable coverage and access to care and quality care, and we know that cost, access, and quality are the challenges, a three-legged stool. But Vermont already leads in a lot of ways. We have expanded coverage for children. We have a very good uninsured, covered lives, number of covered lives. I don't know what the maybe around 2 or 3% now. It used to be around 6%.
Yep.
But I think there's an underinsurance problem, and I think there's an access to primary care issue,
Right.
and I also think there's some educational issues for folks, like to continue to understand what their coverage allows them to do for free, for example, preventative care.
Right.
So I think there's a public education component that I want to make sure that we're funding properly. The budget is kind of the canvas of every session, right? You have a budget adjustment to deal with what's gone up or down,
Right.
and then you have a budget. And the budget really is what demonstrates our state's priorities. So I want to make sure that education generally, but in the healthcare arena, that education is emphasized. I have two funding ideas specifically.
Really?
One, and they've all been modeled, and I did some of this already in state work, and many of the leaders know this. So just to cut to the chase, one would assess the on a number of lives basis the stop loss product in the ERISA block.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the good risk is in the ERISA block
Yeah,
right now,
right.
and everyone who's in a fully insured product pays a 2% premium. That's passed on through to the consumer, but it's built into the rate, and funds state government that among other sources of money. And
Right.
captives are a big area we get money. But in the premium tax and the comprehensive major medical, if you did a commensurate level of assessment, meaning no greater than commensurate with 2% on the number of covered lives in the self-insured book. It's not regulating the underlying plan, which is preempted by ERISA, so it's not getting in the way of the federal law. It goes to the stop-loss product, and projections conservatively are $20 million a year. If you did that, that is not insignificant.
In Vermont?
In Vermont. I'm talking, I have some big,
Wow.
I've got a few that I want to quickly go over with you. So the other one, though, is I want to move Vermont to be in the position of the wholesaler in drug acquisition. There's a bill that we've been able to push forward. Everything I say is meant in a collaborative sense. It's not just the, you're part of trying to work on things. It's never one person. But I do think it takes leadership, and I think it takes articulating what you want to do, and then have people respectfully, like we're saying, push back and say, hey, what do you mean? That's the wrong number. That's the right number. That's why, by the way, I do think it's important that we trust our JFO to be a neutral body.
I'm with you on that.
And that we really have to recognize that it serves the legislature across all parties. But so if you get into the shoe of the wholesaler and Medicaid, conservatively on generics alone, we're looking at $3 to $6 million new dollars a year. And if we did that across, if we were able to leverage a 340B pricing, we probably could go up to almost 20 million. I want to move, so in education funding, I think, we want to let, in my view, deep respect to all the people who work on these things. I think we want to let Act 46, in a sense, work. The way the statute was written, and again, I can always stand corrected, as I understand, it didn't just require closings, and consolidation. It's also contemplated communities that really worked hard together. If they found other collaborations and other ways to save money, that I think we have to be careful, and I'm not impugning any party in any branch here. I think we need to be careful to respect the local decision-making process across every area. I mean, Vermont stands out in the world that way, right? Next to the Swiss cantons, I think we're one of the only.
The school is the community hub. I mean, that's just where
and places like Cabot. I mean, one of the questions is, what are you hearing from? And I mean, they're saying we want to figure out how to have our community hub. We don't want to lose, and that's true in many of the communities. I live in Middlesex, Rumney School. The old part of Middlesex was flooded out in history. I enjoy history. I'm also a historian, but so it's not really the town center as much as it might have been, before we were all here. So now the school is an important part. But my point really is that respect for the community engagement where we can. It doesn't mean there aren't some centralized, sensible things like health coverage, which I think the governor is correct in that. It's really a matter of timing and communication and making sure that when people are going through a budgetary process at the local level, that whatever cards they had when they were in that negotiation stay on the table. So if we're going to take some cards out, we got to do with some advance notice, so there isn't kind of a reliance. I also think we should move off the property tax as a basis for education funding. I think we should
income?
We have income sensitivity on the low end, but on the higher end, a progressive approach, which is the way people. I'm not a progressive. Okay, I'm a Democrat. I'm a pragmatic Democrat. but I think we talk about progressive assessment when we talk about people paying in all kinds of settings according to their ability to do so. And it doesn't mean that people get a free pass, right? It means that people are at different times in their lives and things change. So one of the challenges, as people know, and we may be running out of time, but I want to keep with content, is that the people say, well, you can't go to income because there's too much change, right? It's going to be too chaotic. When I'm looking at the higher end, the way it would simply work is the property value are lower. You'd go to income or property value, whichever is lower, or you'd go to property value or income, whichever is higher. And depending on where you put the cutoff, I think JFO, and I don't want to speak incorrectly, you have to check with them, looking somewhere there too of a 20 million to 40 million in new revenue.
Are you looking at just income? I don't know what the right word is, or revenue. I mean, all of the.
So it's interesting because they had a very extensive discussion about this past year, closer than they've ever come before.
But are they looking at just income, like your salary or your retirement?
Right,
or are you looking at all of the stocks and bonds and revenue?
Well, that's the challenge, right? Is that you don't want to create a whole new collection mechanism because you don't look at stocks and bonds in an investment portfolio now. So you have to have a whole new regulatory structure in order to collect taxes on that.
But that is income in your pocket.
But so the challenge is that we have this hybrid system now, right? We have a system that is essentially both based on your property value and your income basis.
Right.
And in property value is kind of a proxy for wealth,
Right.
money that you have, versus income, which is money that you have coming in the door. And those
Right.
two are not the same thing.
Well,
So Ben, one of the things that I think is so important that you're touching on is like any good legislation is the product of a deliberative process. And when you learn things and you come up against hurdles, you have to look at them. I like to start with as simple as possible, but no simpler. So right now, say in a complex system, the 1040 and the declared income is what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
But that doesn't mean that's what we should end up agreeing upon.
Right.
I'm just saying if you
Just
use
start.
and it's also something we can actually do. As you're going to find, that's one of my themes. Like for example,
do
state
it.
contracts. We have many large, to the tens of millions of dollars, as you know, contracts with out-of-state parties to do work in government. At the Agency of Human Services, I increasingly found
Bulletin 3.5.
I was
memorized.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted. I was
Yeah.
like, why exactly are we spending that money on that part? And sometimes there are proper political reasons or expertise. I mean, I'm
Right.
not saying you never have a contract
Right.
ever. Sometimes you do need one. But I think that that's another area where there's significant potential savings in government. I would like to see a white paper system at the legislature. One of the things that struck me, and what I mean by that is that we're a citizens legislature, and it's right that every 2 years certain
right.
people will come up to speed on things.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think the conversations have to continue to advance roughly from where we left off, because
Right.
we can't spend the first part
Keep
of each
redoing it.
biennium
Right.
So I think some
That's a
form
good
of
idea.
white paper where people would at least be able to look at, and maybe we could, I don't want to give too much more work to ledge council or anything, but where we could kind of set up a system which would track a little bit more kind of where did
That's a
we leave
great
where
idea.
did we leave off.
So you know what's already been done, been there, done that sort of thing, right?
Right, and we
start-
help each other. It's
Yeah.
regardless of party. It's really it's to try to make the time that we spend those statutory weeks.
It's very
as-
tough being new, and you're so
Right.
afraid to make a mistake.
Right.
And how do you catch up? I think that's an excellent idea. The joint fiscal would kill you, but
Yeah.
Well, I gotta keep saying that's excellent
No, that's
idea.
an
to me.
excellent idea.
No, but
oh, I have to tell you some. I have some other ideas, but I won't waste you because I want you
I'd
to talk.
love to hear
But
about
what
it.
are you hearing mostly from? You just mentioned in Calais. What are they saying
Cabot.
out there? Cabot.
Yeah.
What are they saying out there on the local level, on the state level, and we won't get into national because we
Well,
just.
yeah, I think that at the end of the day, we need housing, we need economic development. The business. I'm a small business owner. I have two small businesses:
Yes,
a little
you
law
do.
firm and a gelato shop.
You haven't
And-
even talked about that.
Yeah, no, people. My wife says you got to plug the gelato
Yes, you
shop.
do. Your whole family works
yeah. My family does. You know what? It's a great enterprise to do with children.
Yeah.
It was one of the reasons why I have 4 children, but my younger kids,
They're
right
all
from the
behind the counter.
yeah, they are. And
They
you know
are.
what? They've learned a lot. They've learned people skills. They've
Yeah.
learned, as you might expect. So that was one of the drivers. I also love gelato. Ben & Jerry's had left town. I was kind of mixing and matching my career, starting to do, my law practice was still growing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that there was something that I could withstand vagaries, which thank goodness haven't really happened.
Yeah, right.
But, it's kind of more you got to, and I love working hard.
Right.
So, but I think back to what you're talking about, what's needed out there, we need to tie job training to jobs,
Right.
right?
Thank you.
It's a very, very important thing,
Right.
and we have to, regardless of party. Again, I think I think my style of leadership, if someone were to elect me into a role, will be to listen and collaborate. And use that as a basis for effective change and speak up. It's okay to make a mistake. We're just humans, right?
Right.
If we're trying our best, we're impeccable with our word. We don't take things personally. We don't assume what other people are doing,
Right.
and we work hard. So I think that, for example, when I was in the policy director seat under the Reach Up program, the temporary assistance for needy family and children,
Right.
we subsidize employment, right? And one of the things, it's a small thing, but many of these things add up, whether it's a senior property tax deferral or the Social Security thing that just happened.
Right.
Many things add up to economic stability. But one thing that I want to do for jobs in that area is if a private employer has received a subsidy, when that subsidy ends, if that employee is otherwise qualified, they should be retained. That sometimes happens, but it sometimes doesn't. And I'd like to make that part of the quid pro quo. And that ties into other ways in which the private sector is thirsty for trained employees, right?
Right,
So if we of course need to continue to celebrate vocational technical education and see that the business accelerator programs and the tie-ins with the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, business is at the heart of a successful.
And the tech centers.
And the
I'm
tech
so
centers,
big on tech
exactly.
centers.
That's what I was saying. The technical,
Yeah, no.
and make sure that there's a path to
Right.
sustainable employment.
Right.
Housing as well. It's so important. Like in mental illness, you know, we're a leader in healthcare in the state in many ways, and we have on the books something called mental health parity, and
Right.
for the most part in insurance that's fine. But when you really look at folks struggling with mental illness, and when I did my Master of Public Health at Boston University, I worked with a professor who started this housing first concept, where, you know, if you give someone shelter. And I'm not just talking about like the GA budget. We can do better than the emergency assistance GA budget because we're putting people in motels, right?
Yeah, right,
so
right.
if you put people who are struggling in a place of their own, and mind you, we can't do this overnight. When I said we're going to do this,
Right,
we have to work on it. We're seeing some good, right here in Montpelier,
Yeah.
we've had some good initiative on affordable housing recently.
They need to feel safe
They
in
need
a
to feel
nice
safe.
housing, safe.
Safe and secure.
Yeah.
And you know what that does with healthcare costs?
Yeah.
I
You know
bet.
what it does for their self-worth? Then their ability to help others, their ability to find a job,
Yeah.
and then like the Working People with Disabilities program, which is a different area. I'm not
Right.
trying to mesh things, but I realize time's going. But that's another example where you take a community that has otherwise not been brought in fully. You give them an opportunity, and they succeed. And they're some of the best employees you're ever going to have. So I think
Right.
when you would look at me as a senator, you would look at someone that's going to get into the detail of every matter and try to figure out how to solve the problem. Focus on economic success. Focus on housing. Focus on healthcare. Focus on the environment. We need a long-term
Do you know what
funding plan.
statistic blows my mind?
Which one?
1 in every 4 Vermonters faces food instability.
Yeah.
In Vermont,
Yeah.
in an agricultural state.
Yeah.
A lot of people behind those McMansions
Yeah.
don't have enough food because that's the first thing they cut.
Yeah, so
when-
you know
right?
that's just honestly, I'm
Yeah,
getting me,
McDonald's.
you get me passionate. In my view, that's really unacceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I was director at policy at DCF, I oversaw, among other things, we call it SNAP now, the food
Oh,
stamp
yes, right,
program,
right.
and I spent a lot of time in those rules. We got the EBT cards at the farmers markets,
Yeah,
and
that's
what
great.
I'd really like to do is leverage nutritious purchases.
Yeah.
You know, you can't get alcohol and cigarettes already with food stamps, and food stamps is a low-level subsistence. We can do better
Yeah,
than
yeah,
that.
right. You can't really eat on that,
But there are all kinds of discrete things, whether it's gleaning or whether it's helping people learn about cooking, some of the things that they're during
Right.
the farm to table initiatives. And
Love it.
so anyway, I know we're running out of time, but I think I want people to know that I believe there are solutions to everything. I think that we know what they are. I think that we just don't necessarily say so. We don't say, hey, don't we all have the same challenges? Aren't we all part of the same family? I mean, honestly, I don't want to be too corny here, but we have many of the same needs. If we're fortunate enough to have a job and an income, God bless us. But if we're struggling, we need it gets a little cliche, but that it's not a handout,
true.
it's a help
Help
hand
in,
up.
help.
And then you can,
Right.
that becomes sustainable. I have a handbill which kind of tried to, there's public benefit cliff elimination, there are a number of different other things that
Right.
I tried to outline in my handbill. If people go to my website, I spent a lot of time detailing issues so that folks can explore a little bit more in
Right.
detail. I am actually available all the time to
Great.
people. I return calls within 24 hours if I can help
Excellent.
it. And I know this is a big job, but I think I can. I think I can serve
I
well.
think you can do it. I want you to come back. If you win, come
well-
back. Or any other time to talk about the gelato business.
Exactly. Come back and talk about gelato.
Seriously, I'd like to talk about healthcare with
Yeah.
you. Seriously, would.
I would
gotta
love
shut
to
down
have
the
a
show.
chance to come back, and I
Love it.
really appreciate the opportunity. And I thank the listeners for spending a little time with me.
Yep. Thank
Thank
you
you so
for
much.
tuning
Thank
in.
you,
We'll
Ben. Take
see you
care.
next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.